Jim Bottrell, founder of the Jim Bottrell Real Estate Team, joins us now to talk about the current state of the real estate market. Man, Jim, has it changed quickly?
Yeah, it's been a challenge lately. In fact, when I was getting ready for this last week was one of the more interesting weeks that I've ever had, and seeing just massive changes. So one of the big changes that we've had is we've another big tick of the interest rates. All right, so that went up this last week, and interest rates have been very problematic for us because last December, the interest rate started with a 2. All right, right now they start with a 7. All right, and every time they go up, it creates a whole set of problems. So that's almost a triple in interest rates, and nobody's ever really seen that, at least not in the last 60 years. And the last time the interest rates have gone up 5% was almost 60 years ago. And what that's done is it's caused problems for the housing market and housing prices because buyers' payments are so much higher these days that they're not as interested in buying houses. So that's reduced demand, and with reduced demand goes down prices. Now, you may remember, pretty much every time I've ever been on here, I was always telling people, don't delay. If you want to buy a house, buy it right now. And I've been beating that drum for a year on here.
Right.
And I'm still saying it, despite the fact that interest rates are 7, because they're still going to end up going higher.
How high do you think they're going to go?
Well, so that's interesting. We have 2 more Fed meetings in front of us, right? Because we just ticked up quite a bit. We have 2 more Fed meetings in front of us. And in each one of those Fed meetings, they are saying that in the one in November and the one in January, they are expecting 0.75% in each of those 2 meetings. So we know that, well, mortgage interest rates are not determined by the Fed funds rate, but mortgage interest rates do follow the Fed funds rate. So going back to your question, if you remember back in February, you and I sat right here, and that's when interest rates were started with a 3. And I said by the end of 2022 that interest rates could start with an 8 or a 9.
Wow.
And I took a lot of heat. I took a lot of flack for that. But look where we are, right at the beginning of October, starting with a 7 now. So it's still going up.
So what are the average days on the market, the average house?
Well, it's changing. What's very interesting is that we're seeing a big separation in houses, and we're still trying to figure this out. 2 weeks ago, well, let me take a step back. If interest rates stay flat for a while, we've been seeing a lot of demand come into the market. You know, for example, 2 weeks ago, we started seeing houses getting multiple offers again. We haven't seen that since the spring. Not 70 offers like we were seeing, but we're seeing, 2 or 3 offers. And that was unusual. We're thinking, where are these buyers coming from? Because we hadn't been seeing them for a while. So I picked up the phone. I called a lot of friends that are just like me that own teams and companies all over the country. I said, hey, this is what we're seeing. We're seeing a big uptick in buyers. What are you seeing? And they were all seeing the same thing. Then, of course, last week, interest rates went up again. But going back to your question on time on market, there's actually a big difference. We're trying to figure out where the trends are. It seems to be the good houses, the upper first-time home buyer market, good houses, good neighborhoods, they're going very quickly. If you're not inside that, then your time on market's much, much longer.
So despite the interest rates, we're seeing activity as far as people buying homes.
Yeah, we are seeing activity, and that's actually a really good thing because if we see the activity, we know the demand is there. Right? The thing is people, every time rates are going up, the buyers just disappear. But if we see the interest rates being flat, we're seeing lots of demand. And what will happen is once the interest rates, when they stop raising interest rates, we'll see that demand come back, and then what we're going to end up seeing is we're going to see a shortage of homes in the market again. Now, not as bad as it was before where we're getting all those crazy offers because there just won't be as many buyers. I mean, there are fewer people willing to pay 7% than there were paying, in the 2s. But we will see that demand tick up. We will see a stabilization of the housing prices there.
So if somebody's renting right now and they go, wow, interest rates are really high, but I really need to get into something, what would you say to that person?
I would say do it right now. Do it right now, because if you want to wait, interest rates are just going to go higher.
Right.
And then we know that that's going to happen. There's no way that it's not going to happen. So there's no advantage. And people will often say, well, if I buy a house, my payment is so much higher than if I was to rent that same house. And on the surface, that's true. But when you look at a rent payment, the rent is just what the rent is. Whatever the amount is on that check, you can take that at face value. But with a mortgage, even though that payment is higher, when you start factoring in the principal reduction, when you start taking the massive tax savings that you get because the property taxes you pay that's part of that payment, the interest you pay that's part of that payment, those are both tax deductible. So it hardly seems fair, but people who own a home pay substantially less income taxes than people who rent homes. So if you're an educated buyer and you understand that the face value of the check you write for mortgage is not equal to the face value check you write for renting, then even at today's higher prices and higher payments, it's still cheaper to own than it is to rent. Let's talk about rent for a second. What have rents done? Rents have been going up,
Way up,
right?
way up.
And rents, even today at the high rates of rents right now, they're still below fair market value. So they're still going to go up, and rents always go up historically. So what that does to the renter is it gives no limit to what their monthly cost of housing is. But on the other hand, with a mortgage, it sets it, assuming you get a 30-year fixed, which almost everybody does, assuming you get that 30-year fixed, that sets the upper limit of what your monthly cost of housing will ever be. And there's a really cool thing you can do with mortgages that you can't do with renting. If rates come back down, you can refinance that mortgage and actually lower your cost of housing.
Right.
Can you do that with rent?
Not at all. Not even close. All right,
No.
Jim Bottrell, the Jim Bottrell Real Estate Group. Always good catching up with you.
All
Man.
right, thanks for having me.
You got to keep us tuned into this real estate market.
Absolutely.